So in the previous video, I described how we basically structured the climate web, how we did the initial curation of information to create, in effect, an unparalleled filing cabinet for climate knowledge. In this and a couple of subsequent videos, I'm going to dig into the next step, the value added, how we went beyond creating a file cabinet to delivering actionable knowledge and a collective climate change intelligence. Now, there's actually so much that falls into the value added category that I'm going to break it up into 3 different videos. This video will continue and cover the extracting and organizing of information from sources, etc. It'll cover how we built an index that is pretty comprehensively allows you to navigate the climate web, and how the index serves as front doors for many different topics. The next video will tackle insights pages and dashboards. That may not sound like much, but it actually represents decades of our work in the field and thousands of hours of advanced knowledge curation. And the last video in this particular series will talk about how we've then organized information to help deliver actionable knowledge. We help users access the information that their audience is probably looking for. And we actually help you search the internet for information that might not be in the climate web. So let's go ahead and keep going with extract and organize. So after we organize the sources, the news and opinion, the videos, etc., in a lot of cases, we try and go back to key reports, to key books, and we read a lot of this stuff and we extract key ideas, key graphics from those resources. And then we organize them in their own right, in their own topical headings. So for example, and let me say up front, this is somewhat of an extreme case. This is a book, Our Final Warning, 6 Degrees of Climate Emergency by Linus in 2020. It is a great book in terms of the sheer amount of facts that are in the book, that it makes sense to pull into the climate web so that we can then slice and dice them in all kinds of ways. So there are factoids on the far left. There are dates in the next couple of columns. There are some great quotes. There are some good numbers. There's some graphics. And then there's a ton of ideas in terms of what happens at 1 degree, what happens at 2 degrees, what happens at 3 degrees, what happens at 4 degrees, et cetera, et cetera. And then some thought-provoking ideas. You don't need to be able to read everything on the screen here, but we basically pulled hundreds of graphics and ideas out of this book so that we can then integrate them into the climate web. And that's the idea behind extracting materials from hundreds of different sources and then being able to reorganize them. In a very real sense, this is analogous to the idea of Lego blocks, but these are climate knowledge Lego blocks, and there are 150,000 of them in the climate web. Now, the one limitation of normal Legos is that any given Lego block can only be part of one Lego kit at any given time. In this case, that's not the case, because given the virtual structure of the climate web and the nature of the software, the same climate Lego block can be part of a bunch of different actionable knowledge kits. And we'll get into that with dashboards just a couple of videos from now. But this is an interesting way to think of the climate web, is that we've taken all of this information, we've broken it down into hundreds of thousands of climate knowledge blocks, climate knowledge Lego blocks, and then we can recombine those in whatever ways make sense for specific purposes and specific audiences. So after we extract all of those things from the book Linus, 6 Degrees book, and many other reports and books, we can organize those extracted materials into their own set of extracted materials headings. So hundreds of extracted material headings here: brand risks, black swan risks, biofuels, uh, aviation sector, business roles, business scenarios, carbon neutrality, all sorts of things, hundreds of topical headings specific to the thousands and thousands of graphics and ideas that we've extracted from sources, from videos, from news and opinion. And this slide is actually taken from a prior deck, which is why it's a slightly different color scheme, but the content is totally accurate to today's climate web. So here we have an individual graphic as the active thought. We have some child thoughts that are more extracted graphics. The actual graphic shows up in the notes field on the right-hand side. As you can see, this particular thought is linked to two extracted materials headings in the top left, and it links to its original source in the top right in terms of where did we find this graphic. And all of these extracted materials, whether it's graphics or ideas, always link back to their original source, which is really useful because then you can always figure out where something came from and then look at that source to see what else might be there that's of particular interest to you. And here is a specific example, one particular heading: climate stress testing. There's tons of stuff there. There's some additional subtopics at the far left, then a lot of graphics, a lot of ideas. And in the desktop version of the climate web, I can simply hover over a thought and it will pop up in the right-hand side. In the web client, you'll click on that thought and exactly the same image will pop up in the notes field. So now we have all the sources, we have the news and opinion, we have the videos, we have thousands of topical headings, and now we have the extracted materials. How do we pull it all together? And the way we pull it all together is by creating an index for the climate web. Here is one example of a deep dive index entry for carbon pricing. And so on the left-hand side, you can see the active thought. You can see jump thoughts that point you to a lot of topical headings for digging into carbon pricing. You can see parent thoughts, most of which are index entries in their own rights. You can see child thoughts that are index entries in their own rights that are more granular. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the very top of the page that explores how this index entry serves as a front door into the topic of carbon pricing. Now, to better explain this, I'm going to go ahead and use the eye icon and hide the notes field for just a second so that we're focused on the Plex, and then I'm going to come back to focus on the notes field. So here is a view of the Plex. I've made the links all very obvious temporarily. And as I just explained, you have the jump thoughts that lead into massive resources of all different kinds. You can go up to the parent thoughts, from carbon pricing up to market solutions, from carbon pricing up to policies and measures, or you can come down into carbon price forecasting, carbon pricing for 2 degrees, carbon pricing, political feasibility, the social cost of carbon as carbon price. All of these things are structured as index entries that you can click through and literally navigate climate change just by going through the index and then seeing what is linked as jump thoughts to particular index entries. So if I click on the eye icon at top right to turn the notes field basically into its own website, you can see just how much information is organized in these deep dive index pages. So it starts with some links that are useful, comes down to what are some of the key questions when it comes to carbon pricing, helping bring you up to speed, goes through some of the topics that you might want to explore: the social cost of carbon, cognitive biases in terms of why we've had trouble doing carbon pricing, implicit versus explicit carbon prices. These are all individual thoughts that you can jump to, or the renewable energy sector deep dive, technology information, carbon capture and storage, carbon pricing for 2 degrees. So this index entry not only links you to a ton of stuff, but really gives you an education, a short review of relevant carbon pricing literature, just pointing you to a few of the key sources in the climate web, and then some selected dashboards. So entry points to carbon pricing, the core library, carbon pricing 101, carbon price forecasts, internal carbon pricing, 2 degrees carbon pricing Q and A. All of that, and then also pointing you to carbon pricing search terms. All of that in the index entry under carbon pricing deep dive. And that gives you a sense of why we say that index entries are the topical front door to individual topics in the climate web. Not all index entries are created equal. There are thousands of index entries in the climate web. This is a list of the deep dive topics like the carbon pricing that you've just seen, where it serves as a real front door into the topic, points you to lots of things, brings you up to speed on a lot of issues associated with that particular topic: carbon offsets, business responses, aviation, adaptation, finance sector, extreme events, electric sector, market mechanisms, nature-based solutions. These are all deep dive index entries into the climate web that you can use to really begin your exploration of a topic in an advanced way. And for fun, let me point you, jumping a little bit ahead, to a dashboard here, Save the Climate Conference Topics. And the reason it's here is because it's all index entries. But if you wanted to organize a Save the Climate Conference, what are the topics that you might want to cover? Well, you can see a lot of them here. Litigation, collective action, food waste reduction, climate gaming, climate finance, climate activism, blockchain, carbon offsets, child strike, circular economy, solar energy, soil carbon. The list goes on and on. This is just illustrating how we can mix and match index entries for different purposes to help you explore lots of different things in the climate web. And so that wraps up this first advanced curation video. And now we'll jump into the second advanced curation video.